Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Gold Hoops and God podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lauren Guerra, and today I have a wonderful guest. I have Angela Briones with me. Yay! Hi, Angela. So,
Hello.
Angela is awesome. She is an award winning podcaster. She actually has two podcasts. One of her podcasts is called The Gay Podcast for Everyone. Super fabulous. And then her other podcast is called Thank You for Joining Me, where she ventures into the wild world, the behind the scenes world of podcasting, right? Yeah.
Yes, that's it. That's it.
Amazing. Oh, so good to have you here today, Angela. So we'll go ahead and dive in. And the first thing that I love to talk about with my guests is culture, because Latina culture is so complex. People have such different experiences of growing up Latino, depending, what city and state, depending on, family experiences and all that good stuff. So I'd love to hear from you how you self-identify in terms of your Latinidad.
Yeah, it's such a great question, and it's something that's like I have been exploring even up to now. I'm
Mm,
51 and
mhm.
I'm still kind of unpacking it because when I grew up, we used the word Hispanic. That was like the word we used. And honestly, it wasn't until a handful of years ago that I started hearing Latina more, and
Mhm.
I was just like,
Right.
have I been using the wrong word this entire time? And then
Mm,
my sister would help me, just kind of unpack the different words and the meaning of them and origin of them and the origin of people, where they came from, etc., and what kind
totally.
of language we use, and as a way to identify. So, but growing up, all I used was Hispanic. That was
Mhm.
like
The norm,
the
yeah.
word I used. That was the
Mhm,
the
mhm.
thing. Um, and then when I was a kid, I did Baile Folklorico,
Oh,
like,
fun, I
from the
love it. It's
time I was.
beautiful, yeah.
Yes, and I loved it. And that, like,
Awesome.
helped me get, like, really rooted, right?
Deep into the culture, yeah. Mhm.
Yes, because, like, my mom and my dad, you know, they didn't speak Spanish in the household, it was
Mm.
already, like, it was that time, like, in the '80s where everything, like, it's just, like, we're all watching, I don't
The
know what show we were
assimilation,
watching.
like, the push to really assimilate and not speak
Yes.
other languages other than English. Yeah, that's a thing for
Exactly, that's
sure, for
exactly what I was
sure.
gonna say.
Yeah.
Fantastic, yes. But in my grandmother's house,
Mhm,
in my godparents' house,
mhm.
y absolute Spanish, that's
Uh-huh.
all they spoke. They
Todo en
spoke to me in
español. Mhm,
Spanish.
mhm.
I'd speak to them in English, but they'd speak to me in Spanish. We
Right.
never switched, so I don't know why we didn't do that. But, I grew up in, like, this space where, yeah, you had this Americanized, 80s, everybody,
Sure.
with, like, New Kids on the Block or
Oh,
whatever.
yeah.
But then I'd go to my grandmother's house and, she'd be making tortillas and we'd be
Mhm.
watching Telemundo and all of that, I'm trying to think of Walter Mercado, all these
Woo!
big
Walter
things,
Mercado.
Yes.
Yeah, same in my
Yes.
family's household, both grandmas. If Walter was on the
Yes.
screen, on the
Yeah.
screen, everyone needed to be quiet so we could hear the
Right.
predictions. Oh, yes.
Yes. I
Same,
was super
same.
important, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like everybody be quiet. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, there was that. But then I was also like, I did Ballet Folklorico for years. Like, I don't
Wow.
know how old I was.
That's
Like,
amazing.
let's say from like
Like in your teens or
8 to 15, maybe,
okay.
like, for a
Oh, long
while.
time. Wow.
Yeah, and I really loved it, and that's where,
Beautiful.
like, I probably learned a lot of culture without really understanding that I
Yes.
was learning.
Music,
I was just having
food.
a good time.
Mhm. Mhm.
I was having a good time. But
Mhm.
I also simultaneously actually learned, without realizing at all,
Uh-huh.
I learned about gay culture as well, because a lot of the
Mhm.
men in that dance company were gay.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know I was gay at the time. I
Wow.
had no idea. It
Interesting.
wasn't until many
Oh.
years later that I figured it
Mhm.
out.
Yeah.
But what was wonderful
That's
about
amazing.
that particular time is, like, as I'm identifying, my culture
Mhm.
and that particular aspect, what's being rooted is there are these gay people who are around me, and there's no shame involved in that. Like, I
I love it.
never heard anything
It's
bad. I
wonderful. Oh,
never
that's so
heard anything
good.
derogatory. It
That's so
just
good.
was.
Yeah, we're here,
And
we're enjoying life, dancing, and that's so
yeah,
beautiful.
and I was a kid, and we're all kids there, and then there was,
Yeah.
like, an adult company as well, and then we,
Uh-huh.
eventually moved up into that adult company, and, our parents are along with us, of
For the
course,
ride, yeah.
and
That's great.
and all the parents were very close, and I never heard anything bad. So,
I love it.
yeah,
That is fantastic. That is so wonderful. And what a gift, to be able
yeah,
to learn such an important form of dance, culturally is super important. And to also kind of feel welcome and embraced with other queer folks too. That's so good. That's really good.
yeah, without really knowing it at all,
Without
you know.
knowing
And
it. Yeah.
what's so funny is like after that, I start to realize as I'm like telling you this story,
Yeah.
is somehow between that moment and then like coming out,
Hmm.
that's where like shame starts to set
Oh,
in. And that's
interesting.
just, I think, like
Mm-hmm.
conditioning and
Hmm.
stuff like that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Does it remind me, did you grow up in Texas? Or
Yes,
where
I
did you
grew
grow
up
up?
in
You did. Okay.
was born and raised in Austin. I lived
Oh.
in New York for just a minute
Oh, fun.
and then
Mhm.
came back to
Texas.
Austin, and now I live like just an hour outside of the city.
Oh, cool. Right
And
on.
yeah, and I love, I grew up in Austin when it was the live music capital of the world, and when,
Mm.
like it was just when Keep Austin Weird, which is the logo of
It's
the
really,
city,
yeah, yeah,
was
yeah, it's
actually
true.
true. Now it's
Oh
not
my
true
gosh.
so much, but like that's when I grew up in the city, and it was great. It was
Oh,
wonderful.
cool. That's
But
great.
I can't say like I think the vibe in New York definitely was more welcoming, even
Mm.
though we had like LGBTQ um, bars and clubs or whatever in Austin. There's like one or two, but in New
Yeah,
York there's a
it's a
vibe of the
whole
city,
neighborhood of,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel
Mhm.
like when you talk about identity, it's so funny because I feel like I wasn't. I sometimes grapple with what's more important, like
Mm.
being Latina, being LGBTQ. Like this is like
Let
this.
You know
Yeah.
what? Yeah, we should talk about that a little bit because I've heard you're not the first person, right?
Okay.
I've heard
Mhm.
this come up a lot of times because it seems for some folks that the Latinx side, Latino side
Mhm.
tends to be less accepting versus the queer side, it tends to be more Caucasian, more white, right?
Mhm.
Queer community. And so I've heard many queer Latinx people talk about the same thing of feeling almost like having to choose,
Yeah.
and I think it's so important for people of color to have space, for there to be spaces for queer people of color where you feel totally embraced and it's not like a pick and choose of one half of oneself. um yeah, I would love to
Yeah.
hear a little bit more from you on that.
Yeah. Well, it's so weird that you say that. I'm glad you say that because I thought that it was just me, truthfully. And
No,
this
no.
is the point of our podcast,
Yeah,
right? So that
yeah,
we can share stories and other people realize that they're not the only ones thinking or feeling these things. But
yeah.
yeah, I don't know why I've always thought like, do I have to fight for one thing more than the other?
Right.
It's
No.
such a weird thing, and I
Yeah,
don't even know where that comes from. And I've
yeah.
been doing a lot of thinking lately about like how much of what we put on ourselves is actually just conditioning. But then you think, I don't
Hmm.
even know where this came from. You try to like look back into the files,
Undo.
right?
Yes,
And
yes,
you're
yes,
like,
yes.
I can't even figure out where this came from.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, there's a lot of things I'm like, where did I learn that? Or
Yeah.
why do I feel that way about something? And you really try to like unravel it. It's like, oh, it's like society, or that's some kind of weird like social conditioning that I don't have to follow. I don't have to do
Yeah.
that. So it is really fascinating. But going hand in hand with culture is faith. And religion is a hot topic for
Sure.
a lot of reasons. And I know that religion, especially Christianity, has been, let's say, not the most welcoming place for a lot of LGBTQ people. And so I would love to hear from you kind of what your experience has been, or how you kind of see ways of navigating that reality, because some families are very religious, and then one of the cousins comes out, and then it becomes like a big scandal, or the person gets kind of ostracized, and there's all kinds of things that happen. And then on the flip side, there's families that are very welcoming, and that's the best, when they're accepting and welcoming of their family members and friends. So
Yeah, and I'm really lucky, like, I'm more on that other side, that
that's
flip
great.
side,
That's
where
awesome.
it's not to say that there was excuse me, weren't challenges for,
Sure.
my mom to, just like she was always accepting of me and
That's awesome.
demonstrated unconditional love, but she also had questions. And that was kind of where
Sure.
my podcast like grew out of the space of like,
Oh,
hey, when we come out and we give our truth to somebody, to our
yeah.
parent, let's say, then that person has a coming out process as well with their friends of like, oh, my
Right.
daughter is gay.
Mhm,
When they
mhm.
ask how their kids are, and a
Right,
lot of
right,
times, like, that's
right.
a parent dynamic, right? Where the parents get together,
Oh, the
families get
chisme of the
together.
parents. Yeah, yeah,
Right. Yes,
yeah.
exactly. And start
It's the
talking.
catch up. Mhm. The catch up
Exactly.
season of like, oh, so and so's doing this. Oh yeah, she got into this college, and oh yeah, so and so got married, and it's that chisme time.
Exactly.
And it's true, parents, of course, right? Parents talk about their children, and so I really appreciate you sharing that. That's amazing. I hadn't really thought of that. That it would also be a process for the family just as much as a person who's coming out. That there's
Yeah.
also a coming out process. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you talk about like identity and then faith,
Right.
I think about like when I was growing up, my grandmother's kitchen table, there was the Last Supper and, the
Yep.
Virgen de Guadalupe when you're walking in, that type thing. And
Yep.
so, you're talking about people coming together, having the cheese
Mhm.
man talking about,
Yeah.
their kids or what have you, and just catching up, right? And if you have a kid who's LGBTQ,
Mm.
you might feel like I can't tell this person because they also grew up, it, we probably all grew up Catholic, in the Catholic Church,
Most.
and
Yes.
like
Yes.
rooted in that Catholicism, etc.
Sure.
So you
Yeah.
don't know who are the people you can come out to and talk to, whatever, and especially about your kids. That's such a sensitive
Oh,
subject,
yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
So, and then when it comes to faith, and then you're going to talk to somebody who may not believe that,
Mm.
you know, LGBTQ people are, whatever, accepting or not, like we
Mhm.
shouldn't do that or what have you. So
Right, right.
you run into these walls. But for me, I was lucky, like I said, to
That's awesome.
grow up with a family that by the time I did come out,
Mhm.
they demonstrated unconditional love. They
That's
had
awesome.
questions, my mom specifically, a lot of fear because listen to the news, you hear
You
stories,
know?
what have you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it does push upon your faith because as you hear those stories, you're like,
Right.
these people are going to, they're saying they're Christians, they're saying they're going to church, they're saying that they're doing these things, and then they're
Mhm.
demonstrating acts that are not
The
love.
Worst.
They're,
Yeah,
yeah,
the
the
opposite of being
opposite of
Christian.
love. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So true.
exactly. Yeah,
That's
but for
so
me
true.
personally, as far as faith goes, like, I did grow up Catholic. I had, probably a lot of questions as, you do the catechism, the CCD classes and all that
Right.
stuff. I was, again, I didn't know it was gay growing up. I had no idea. I should have known. It was one of those things where it's like, oh, it was there all along, but I was the last one to know, that type thing.
Oh, yeah.
So as I'm going through, I think it was just a lot of conditioning of like, this is what you're supposed to
Yeah.
do in church. This is what you're supposed to, have
Right.
your communion, do this, do that. But I never really knew why. I was just like,
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
going to the classes and you're being taught like these facts,
Yes.
but I'm
Yes.
like, I felt
Yes.
like I was always wanting to ask a question, but I was that shy kid who never did.
Mm.
And so
Yeah. Yeah.
um now I'm one of those people. I don't go to church. I have a lot of faith though. I have a lot of faith in
Yeah.
God. And
That's
I
amazing.
feel like it's grappling because I feel like when I'm with people who I do know that, they go to church, they're real into their church, they're
Yeah.
real into the Bible or what have you.
Mhm. Mhm.
I feel like my faith is just as strong as theirs. It may be a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
different, but it's just as strong.
It may be a little different, but it's okay. Yeah.
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 But I wonder like if they
Amazing.
how they see it sometimes. But a lot of times, honestly, I walk into the space the same way I do as a gay person, which is,
Yeah.
you know, it's just a fact. I'm a gay person, period.
Yeah.
And you either believe that God created all people or you don't. I don't know.
Right. Right. And there,
That's where I'm coming from.
no, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like that's so important for people to know. Like, it's okay to ask questions. That honestly,
Yes.
that has been
Yes.
one of the biggest gifts that I've had from and I've mentioned this before on the podcast, my teachers and professors in general, I would say 99% of them always welcomed questions. You
Nice.
don't, and that was incredibly freeing because I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, like, can I challenge this? Can I ask about XYZ without getting like super in trouble, right? So being able to ask questions, and it's true. That's the irony of church, is that there are people that they go through the motions of going to
Mm-hmm.
church, but the way that they live doesn't look very Christian.
Right.
They're not caring, they're not accepting, they're not helping others, they're not doing any of the stuff that is supposed to be demonstrative of like what a Christian is, right? And so that doesn't make sense to me. But it's true. Church is a complicated thing, and I get why a lot of people leave or have left or are not that keen on it anymore,
Mm-hmm.
even if they grew up with a certain tradition. Yeah, it's fascinating. I am grateful though that there is like a handful of churches that are open and accepting. Like they're
Yeah.
out about it. That they like, we love all of God's people, all of God's children are welcome here. Thank goodness, like thank goodness that there are some churches that are like that. And I wish more churches were like that. And I know, they can be hard to find. Like it can be challenging to find those kind of spaces, but they're necessary.
Yeah, they're absolutely necessary. And it's like, I recently, it was a funeral actually that I needed to go to,
Mm.
and, I wanted to go to. And of course, there's the mass in the church and what have you. And I always feel so almost uncomfortable, and not
Mm.
because of me, not because of
Mhm.
my relationship with God, but because of other
Mhm.
people, of like,
Oh,
I
interesting.
feel like I feel like
Oh.
I'm walking into this space where it's like, they're like, "Oh, she walked into this space and she's not burned at the stake or something."
Oh
Like,
my gosh,
and that's
yeah.
just like me, and that's a horrible thing to
That's
say.
an internal fear for sure.
Like, yes, but it's like that's the fear that's happening, is like she was able to come into this space. And
Yeah.
that's just literally, isn't that a horrible thing to feel?
Yeah.
And that's just that's conditioning, that's
It's
shame,
conditioning. It is.
that's
It
and
is. It
that's
is.
all these things that we have to work through. And I've really
Sure.
had to like unpack a lot of that and kind of just go, that's just you, Angela. That's just your fear. Like,
Right.
that's your fear and your projections based on other people's fear. It's just the
Mhm.
weirdest, like,
I mean, I will
layering.
say this, the concept is not out of nowhere though, right? Okay. Like as far, I'm going to put my like theology hat on for a second.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
we have like uh writings, theologians that, like, for example, I think it was by Jonathan Edwards, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. That's the
Yes.
name of the, right. So this
Yes.
idea of that, don't screw up, don't make any mistakes, because there will be literally hell to pay.
Mm.
And this idea of like a fire and brimstone, all this kind of thing, it's intense. It's very intense. I choose to believe that God is more of a loving God, that God is more of a forgiving God. So, you know, um, but yeah, like I don't know why there's such this clinging on to like fear, right? Like this, it's like a fear-based
Mhm.
mentality to like in other words, like scare people into good behavior, punishment, right? The sense of punishment and be good behavior, because otherwise you're going to be in trouble. And like
Mhm.
that, it makes me sad. You know what I mean? I'm like, I don't think God is like that.
Not at
I
all.
don't.
I don't think.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, I don't think so. I think God is more of like a compassionate God, loving God.
Yes.
Feed the poor, clothe the naked, visit those who are in prison. Like that's my
Yeah.
jam. Like that's how I see God being more
Same.
so. So, yeah, it's fascinating though. It's fascinating how like all of that plays out, in churches and families, things like that. So
Yeah. And
it's
I just
intense.
appreciate spaces. I recently found this person online. I think she's a pastor, I believe,
Mhm.
um, of a church out of Toronto.
Mm.
And you may know who she is, may not. I don't know. But either way,
Uh-huh.
I love that they're showing up in these spaces
Yeah.
and talking about also the LGBTQ community, talking about
Totally.
people of color. And she is a person of color,
I love
and
it.
who, yeah, and who is like just, it's just representation, and it's also kind of like dismantling I keep using the word condition, but that's because that's truly, I believe
It is
everything is rooted from there.
conditioning.
I really do believe that.
Totally.
And if we could just walk into spaces and just be like, this is who I am. I'm
Yeah.
a Hispanic person. I'm LGBTQ. These are facts, and
Yeah.
guess what?
Yeah.
God made me just like he made you, or he or she,
Right.
or whoever whatever you believe God is.
Exactly. Yeah. When I lived in San Francisco, there was Sunday mass, like in the evening,
Mhm.
I would always say I would go to church and then I go to church. I go to Castro. I go to the Castro dance with my
Oh,
friends,
nice.
right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
most weekends,
That's
and
awesome.
I have to say, like, dancing is something that has always been very important to me, that I love. And so going out dancing with my friends is also how I experience God. Is also how I feel like alive and feel connected to other people, is going dancing. And so yeah, that was like my thing, is like Sunday is church then church.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's Church Street is like one of the main streets in the Castro district in San Francisco. So it works. It works perfectly.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, it's good times. Yeah.
I've only been in
Oh
that
my god.
area like once, but it was so awesome. It was
It's
so
the best.
awesome.
Yeah, it's totally the best.
Yes. It's wonderful.
And
But I
West
think
Hollywood
like,
here too in LA is a lot of fun. Like I'm oh my gosh, so
oh
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's like when I think these are the moments when, like I said earlier, what do like I feel like I carry being Hispanic, period. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a brown person. Like
Yeah.
that's just who I am. You can see that.
I am. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And you may or may not be able to know that I'm gay or not. And so I feel like that's why that one pushes a little stronger, because that one
Mhm.
might be the one that somebody doesn't really know. And it's so important to me that
Interesting.
somebody knows it. You know what I
Oh,
mean? Like I'm
interesting.
just like I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of who I
Yeah.
am.
Yeah.
And so
That's amazing.
I don't want to diminish it in any way, shape, or form. And
Good for you.
it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. So, I wanted to mention, so I was listening to your podcast and
Mhm.
you mentioned a moment. It sounds like it was a pretty powerful moment for you of
Mhm.
being at the bookstore. I think you mentioned it was like Barnes and
Yes, yes, yes,
Noble, and
yes.
you were walking in walking around the bookstore, looking at the magazines, and you noticed some magazines that were geared towards the queer community, right? Lesbian or gay,
Mhm.
right, those were the magazines that
Yeah,
were there,
like
and that
like
you were nervous to kind of pick one up and buy one because of el que dirán, what will people say? And I
right.
think this is a big issue in Latino, in a lot of communities, but in Latino community, we're always kind of taught that our actions will reflect back on our families. Like,
Yes,
what will they
100%.
say? What will the neighbors think? So
Yeah.
I'll hand it over to you if you want to kind of share like that moment, or kind of what has come from those kind of moments.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. That is 100% the umbrella where all that came from. And that was when I was
Mm,
coming out to myself, which is a
uh-huh.
whole process, right? Because like you're trying to figure things out for yourself
Yeah.
before, and that can last, a day. It can last 10 years. Who knows?
Sure. It can
And
take
before you
time.
come
It
out
can
to
be, yeah.
somebody else,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
So
mhm.
back then, I think I was like 20-ish, I think.
Oh, right.
And realizing, oh, I think I'm gay. And then you see like The Advocate or Curve magazine. Those are two of the LGBTQ magazines, especially
Mhm.
the biggest ones at the time. And I just really wanted to pick one up and just
To check
like,
it out, yeah.
yeah, I'm just like, I just want to know, like, I don't know, is this like, what is this about? What is this magazine about?
Mhm,
Like, it really was nothing more than curiosity, right?
mhm, mhm.
But it took me forever to just be able to actually pick up that magazine because of, ¿qué va a decir la gente? What are they going to
Right,
say? What are people going to
right.
say? I was really nervous if I picked up that book or I picked up that magazine, somebody was going to see me because Austin was a
Mm,
small town at the time.
mhm.
And, somebody was going to see me. They were going to know I was gay. They were going to
Right.
tell my mom before I could tell my
Everyone's
mom.
gonna
It was
know.
going to be this shameful thing.
Mhm.
And it was just one of those things where it took
Wow.
me forever to just loop
Mm.
around, then I'd leave, come back another time, loop around. And I
Mm.
can't tell you how long it was before I actually was able to pick it up and then
Wow.
actually pick it up and open it. It was a
Yeah.
process. And it was
You
a
to be
process because,
brave, to find that bravery to be like, "Okay, the courage. I gotta do this. I'm
right.
gonna
And you
grab the
feel,
magazine. I'm gonna buy it."
yes, but that's where shame comes in because you're like,
Yeah.
I'm hiding, even looking
Yourself.
at this magazine.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
somebody somewhere, something, whatever told me I was not supposed to do this, be this,
Mm.
whatever. And so you're hiding this thing. And then that creates an internalized shame and the internalized homophobia.
Yep.
And so that was a whole other chapter in my life where I didn't even realize that
Mm.
I was holding on to all that internalized homophobia.
Yeah.
And it was a process. But now, it's, and I never forget that moment,
Yeah.
ever, ever,
It's a
ever,
pivotal
when I'm
moment.
when I'm in like Barnes and Noble now, and I just pick up a book or pick up whatever, and I don't
Yeah.
care who's around me or whatever.
Good for you.
There's just like such a freedom in that because I know that
Yes.
it wasn't always like that,
It
you know?
wasn't always like that. No, it's so true. That's a beautiful sharing, and it is beautiful, those moments when we can look back and realize how far we've come, how much we've
Yeah,
grown as a person, like the courage, right? The courage to be different, the courage to be yourself, because I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, they can get to, way up in their years, and they still have not been able to be honest with themselves, and still not
right.
able to like be themselves freely. And that's so, to me, that's so heartbreaking. And so I commend you. I think that's awesome that you
Thanks.
you know were able to kind of go through that process and come out the other side, and know yourself, and be true to yourself fully. It's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
thank
super
you.
cool.
And it's like
Yeah.
when you talk about identity, you know, I feel like, and I'm kind of getting off track, and this is my
No, go for it, go
51-year-old
for
brain right now.
it.
But
Go for it.
but when you talk about identity and stuff like that, I just think like I am so proud to wear all of these hats as most people
Yes.
are. And when
Yes.
I meet other people, and there if I meet another person who is also Latina and they're LGBTQ,
Mhm.
I'm just like, there's a connection there
A deep
because
connect.
of
Yes,
our
absolutely.
identity. So if I meet somebody else who, oh, they're also LGBTQ, but maybe they're a different culture, what have you,
Mhm,
you
mhm.
know, we connect on that, but like there's something of like somebody who like really understands all the
Yeah.
different facets of my identity, like somebody who understands, Walter Mercado, like,
Yes. Oh
who
my
gets
gosh,
it.
I love it. I love it. So let's talk about Walter for a second. So was your
Okay.
family, did they attend church like occasionally on like the main holidays, or did they go pretty consistently? And I have to say, and I think it's important. So
Mhm.
Walter he was a psychic. For those of folks who don't know,
Yes.
Walter was a super, super famous psychic and tarot reader, that he was basically a fixture in a lot of Latinx households. He would come on like during the news, or he had his own show as well at some point, I
Yeah.
think. And he normalized things like astrology and tarot reading and things like that, which is pretty unique. And so I'm curious, as far as like, how Walter fit into your family's understanding of faith and religion. I'd be super curious to hear.
That's so interesting. You know what's funny is because I remember, well, my to answer your question, let me back up. My grandparents were at church every week,
Okay.
and when they couldn't
Catholic
attend
church.
church, Catholic church,
Catholic church.
and when
Okay.
they couldn't
Mhm.
attend church, as they got older, the priest would come to their house, give them
Oh, wow.
communion. They
Yeah.
had a very close
So very
relationship with their
committed, devout
church.
Catholics. Okay.
Yes,
Hmm, hmm.
very. And my parents were kind of so more like holidays, that type
Christmas,
thing.
Easter type
My
of
mom
thing.
and I would try to go or I'd tag along with my mom,
Sure,
pretty
sure,
often.
sure.
But it was a little bit different. And I think that was more of like the the sign of the times, like you were talking about
Sure. Yeah.
earlier, of like
Yeah.
just like this
In general.
differentiation in the
Hmm.
80s, it was a
Yeah.
different vibe. I don't
It
know.
was. It was. Yeah, it's true. I mean, in general, I think church attendance has gone down a lot over the years. Like, so that
Yeah.
makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Cool.
But like Walter, you mentioned such an interesting thing. I mean, you're right. He was a psychic, a tarot card reader, etc., which kind of like goes against,
Yeah, it's a
the
little
religion, right?
different. It's a
But
little
for some
different for sure.
reason, I mean, he was a fixture in all of our
He's a fixture.
households.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe because he, came on, like you said, right after the news on, I think it was probably Univision or
Yeah,
something. Like he just had
Telemundo,
that
Univision,
set
Televisa. Hmm.
thing.
Sure.
Um, excuse me. I probably should have done my mute, but,
That's okay.
but I think maybe I'm questioning, was that why he was more accepted? Is because like as far as like being a psychic and a tarot card
Uh-huh.
reader, like was he accepted just because that was what came on the television? Period.
Oh, he's just kind of in front of the
Yeah,
audience.
like, I'm questioning, like, was
Interesting,
it a
interesting.
thing
That's a good
where
question.
somebody? Because 'cause I'd have to ask my grandmother, which, of course, she's passed, and I'm not even, but, like, I don't know why that was an
It's
important
really
moment. Like, why did we
fascinating.
all stop and watch the TV during
It's
that time? Because we
great.
all
I mean,
did, right? We
I
all
love it.
did.
I
But
love it.
I think we did just because it was like it was just the pattern of the television. Okay, now is when we sit and we listen to Walter Mercado, and
Yeah.
we this is just what we do, and it's almost
Mhm.
like a, I don't know,
An
like,
automatic thing. I would be super curious to do some research on this because I know for sure there's also Latino families that were not into Walter Mercado. That we would call them more conservative.
okay, so, like, would
If
they
you want,
change the television when he came on or
yeah, they would
something?
change. Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
okay,
So it was seen as witchcraft. It was seen as like,
right,
no, don't get into that. So the more conservative Christians
okay,
would not necessarily watch it. But yeah, it's something so fascinating that he really. I mean, he was a staple. Like
yeah,
he's so. In other words, even the families that would turn the TV off knew why they were turning the TV off or knew of him. Right, if you think about it.
yeah, yeah,
So he's super fascinating. I think that he's part of why I love tarot. I was like, this began very young. I was a little girl at my grandparents' house seeing Walter on the screen. So
yes,
that's probably why like I've also like I would say I've expanded my spiritual life or spiritual practices to include things like tarot and curanderismo and things like that. So
yeah.
it's fascinating. It's super great.
Well, and of course he was, like, super flamboyant
Oh
too, right?
yes. Oh yes.
And I don't know if he was gay. I don't know if you happen to know or not, but I know he was flamboyant,
He was. I'm
and
more than likely I think he was.
I
I
think
think it was one of
possibly,
those
right?
things. Um, was it Juan Gabriel? I think he was the one who said this of like what you can see you don't ask about, basically kind of saying like duh,
Uh,
like what I don't have to
yeah,
explain
yeah,
myself. Like
right.
which is great. I was so great. I think similarly, more than likely, yeah, I think
Probably
Walter
so.
yeah, he
But
was gay
either
most
way,
likely.
like, he was flamboyant,
He was
and
pushing the boundaries of like,
yes,
feminine masculine for sure. For
yes,
sure.
feminine, masculine, yes, absolutely, and
Mhm.
I again, another moment where I never heard anything negative about that,
Mhm.
ever, you know?
It's
We
amazing,
just
actually,
accepted
yeah.
this person for
Yeah,
what they did.
yeah.
They did this tarot card reading, or they did this, horoscope
Mhm.
type reading, and there was never a judgment of what he looked like, of what he was
Amazing.
wearing. It was always kind of
Yeah.
a celebration. And of course, at the time, I didn't recognize it. I didn't like clock it or anything. But
Mm.
now looking back, like, gosh, I'm
Yeah, it's
so
significant.
grateful. Do you know what I mean?
Same,
So
same.
grateful.
It's amazing. I love Walter Mercado. Actually, in some of the courses, in most of the courses that I teach, when we'll have a film project or film assignment, and one of the options is to watch the documentary. I think it's called Con Mucho Mucho Amor. It's about
Yes.
Walter
Yeah.
Mercado,
Yeah.
and
Right.
my students. They love it. The students who had heard about him, they're like, "Oh my God, that was so great! That was so spot on." And other students who had no idea who he was, they're like, "How cool! This guy is like amazing!" I'm like, yeah, like so I try to include that as one of the options, and because that was a really well done documentary on his life. I loved
It
it.
was. I
It
really
was
liked
very
it. I
good.
really enjoyed it. Of
Yeah.
course, I can't remember what they said about sexuality, and that's fine. But that's because my memory is horrible. So there's that. But
Oh
but
no.
either way, I just really am grateful that I had, you know, good experiences with
Yeah,
no one
that's a blessing.
placing judgment on
It's a
what
blessing.
he
Totally.
wore and how he
Mhm.
self-expressed and stuff like that.
Yeah, because isn't it so interesting that what we hear, we take it kind of like as intel. In other words, if people in our families had spoken bad, right? Had spoken ill about Walter Mercado, being like, "Oh, why is he dressed like this? Why did it?" You start to absorb that, and it's like a red flag. Like, oh,
Yeah,
being like that is not okay, right? We
absolutely.
learn. We're observing. We're especially as children, we're sponges. We're observing. We're
Right.
learning things all the time, and so no, you're right. It is a blessing that someone like Walter Mercado was well accepted on the screen for our
Yeah.
families.
Yeah,
It's
and
great.
especially as, like, when you're, an LGBTQ person and you're coming out to yourself and you're still in the closet and you're coming out to
Mhm.
yourself, you're hyper aware of what the
Any
people who you
commentary,
love and
yeah,
are
makes
around
sense.
are saying, or even what they're
Yeah,
not saying.
that makes sense.
If Walter had come on the television and anybody in my family had turned off the TV and walked away, I
Right.
might not have clocked it as it was because of religious reasons. I might have thought
Mhm.
they just didn't like him because of the way he expressed himself.
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
But like
Yeah.
different things, you internalize them differently.
Totally. Yeah, it's amazing. It's super fascinating. Oh, this has
Yeah.
been such a great conversation,
Thanks.
Angela.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yay. So as we're wrapping up, I want to ask you, as we're talking about childhood and memories and things like that,
Yeah.
if you wouldn't mind sharing any advice you have for young Latinas today. And also if you want to share kind of what you've learned as far as like inner child healing, the inner niña, if you could go back in time and tell little Angela a piece of advice or guidance, what would that be?
These are such great questions. These are such great questions specifically because like right now in our world, like I mean, you got Bad Bunny about to be on the Super Bowl and people are like,
Super amazing. Oh,
that
people are
you've got
freaking out. Yeah.
people are yeah, you've either got people who
He's
are
not a US
excited,
citizen.
yeah, or people who are like, why,
Because
And
he's amazing.
there's another moment where there's a lot of shame can be placed on that of like, hey, what are
Yeah.
people trying to say about me or my
Yeah.
culture or community as a whole?
Yep.
I don't know. I think I would tell myself, like I would just go back and tell myself like really enjoy that time that I was dancing in Baile Folklorico. That was such a
Oh,
magical time for me for
I love
so
it.
many reasons.
I love it. It's
And
great.
I wish I could like go back in that moment
Hmm.
and really like be who I am right now,
Oh,
as an
yeah.
adult and
Yeah.
really observe the people around me who were not only celebrating their culture, but also celebrating their identity as
I
gay
love it.
people and
Mm,
just being themselves.
that's
They
beautiful.
weren't trying to like wave any flag and do anything in particular. They just were. They were the flag. You know what I
They
mean?
were the
They
exactly. They were just
they
being
were the
themselves.
beauty. They were the rainbow.
Amazing.
They were all their true colors.
I
And
love it.
I wish I could go back and learn how to be or how to wear my true colors
Mm,
as early as possible, you know.
mm, hmm.
It's hard though. You got to
It's
do it when it's
hard.
right.
Sometimes it just takes a little time, like
Yeah.
it's a process. It's a
Yeah.
process. So I love that. That's a beautiful
Yeah.
memory
So
to
maybe just
share.
being
Right.
yourself,
Be yourself. Yeah.
you being yourself, you can I would tell myself like when it's right and when it's okay to like share who you are fully,
Yeah.
uh is the right time. It,
Yeah.
that's just the right time, period.
I love it.
I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes sense, but
That makes
yeah.
yeah. I love it. Awesome. Perfect.
Thanks for having
Um,
me on your podcast. I love your
yeah.
podcast, by the way. I'm a
Oh, thank
fan.
you. You're so sweet. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Angela. This was amazing.
Absolutely.
So, folks, thank you for joining us today. This is the Gold Hoops and God podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Guerra. New episodes are available every Wednesday. You can listen to the audio everywhere you listen to your podcast, and then video of the interviews are available on YouTube on Wednesdays as well. So, thank you so much.
Thank
And don't
you.
forget to follow Angela on her two podcasts, the Gay Podcast for Everyone. And thank you for joining me. I'll be sure to tag her on the socials. Thank
Awesome. Thanks.
you.
Thanks, Dr. G.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.